I think, so both you and I remember when we started getting into all the Brandon Fouché stuff for a little bit, right? And focusing on some of the socialization side of things and focusing on, kind of detaching from some of the obedience stuff and focusing on some of the more behavioral side of things. I look at, so back to a point we were talking about earlier where we were saying everybody lives a different life with their dogs, right? I live a life with my dog where I don't really use obedience commands that much at this point, right? They're obviously highly important and I use them for management purposes and when guests are coming in the door and things like that. But 99% of the success that I've had with my dogs and the reason why I live what I consider to be a good life with them is because my dogs understand the rules and boundaries of living in the house, right? And additionally, they are what I would consider to be well socialized, meaning I understand what they need in order to thrive in a social setting, so I don't need to manage them so much with commands and stuff like that, right? How do we balance out in the dog world where, when we learn about dog training, we learn about how do I teach a command? How do I enforce a command, right? How do I train these different complex behaviors and stuff like that? When in actuality, a lot of the long-term success we see clients have comes from once they've learned those obedience commands, learning how to then phase them out and actually teach the dog what's expected of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, this is one of those areas where I think there are some pretty big holes in like traditional dog training education. Is like this area right here. Like most of the dog training schools are very obedience focused. They teach almost nothing about solving behavior problems. And a lot of times the behavior problem like modules of the schools are really like, teach the obedience and then use that obedience to give all this structure. The dog does place commands and is in like, they're always in command and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that's what I learned in the beginning too. And we're not really like teaching about like breaking down the behavior problems themselves. So I think, part of it is rethinking like what dog training is. So for instance, my friend, Forrest Mickey, who I know that like who Forrest is, right? Super talented trainer in the sport world. He reached out to me a couple of weeks ago because he had a friend who works in a shelter who reached out to him, and basically the question he posed to me was like, what's the advice you would give somebody who's like just adopting a dog? And I said, well, like, do you want advice on like what to do, like just like actually do when they get that dog, or like training advice? And he's like, well, how about both? But for here, I'll focus on the training advice. And the advice I gave was like, when they start training, rather than focus on the like traditional 5 commands, think about like what skills do you need your dog to have to be successful with you, such as like, I need my dog to understand rules around like what happens when I open my front door. Right. And so a lot of people, they know like, hey, if I want to teach my dog to do it down, like I'm going to set it up this way. I'm not going to wait until the moment when I actually need my dog to down and try and teach it to him in that moment. Like I'm going to take this time out of my day and we're going to practice downs, and I'm going to break the exercise down into parts, and we're going to do repetitions, right? We're going to do 10 minutes of repetition. We're going to do that 2-3 times a day. We're going to do it multiple days in a row, and we're going to make progress, right? Very rarely do people approach these sort of life skills in the same way. Like very rarely do we find our clients just going, you know what? Like one of the big things that I need my dog to do, like I said, is maybe just understand what is the expectation when this door opens. Maybe the doorbell's ringing. Maybe I just need to check my mailbox, whatever, but what's the expectation? And so rather than wait till when I have to open the door because somebody's there or because I have to go outside, like we're going to set aside some training time, and we're going to build a training session around this activity and train it with the same mindset, right? Like you said, is it a skill issue or a mindset issue? And I think here it's a mindset issue, that this is dog training. We're not teaching sit down, stay. We're teaching, this is what I need you to do in this context. This is what my expectation. My friend Lynn Boki, who's a really talented guy as well, he calls them behavior expectation drills is the term he uses. I like that. Right? Yeah. So again, like how big of an impact is it going to make on your success with this dog if your dog knows how to sit on command, versus how big of an impact is it going to make on your success living with this dog if it knows what are the rules around the door?
Yeah.
Right. And so just sort of reprioritizing our training a little bit, I think can go a really, really long way.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, right, at the end of the day, and this is something that actually, to name drop Bart Bellin again, but one of the first times I ever met him, he said this thing because, Bart's known for innovating some very, very innovative dog training techniques. But like he would say, there's nothing new in dog training. Like dog training's been the same for 50 years. There's been nothing new in 50 years. There's just different ways of applying the same old skills.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing really new or different about what Cesar Millan is doing versus what an obedience trainer is doing. They're just putting their focus on a different area of learning.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at somebody like Caesar or like Brandon Fouché, or then juxtapose it against somebody like Michael Ellis, right? Yeah. When what they're doing is working, it's working for the same reasons. When it's not working for the same reasons because it's boiling down to the same principles of learning, right? If you watch Cesar Millan's work carefully, like he may not be able to define negative reinforcement, but that dude is a master at executing negative reinforcement. He uses a tremendous amount of negative reinforcement in his work, and he does it with the precision of like a heart surgeon, right?
Yeah.
And so he's applying negative reinforcement not to sit down, stay, but to, behavior problems, right? And same with punishment, right? Like his application of punishment in most cases, I've seen him make mistakes and do things incorrectly. We all do. We just, the rest of us have the benefit of not having a cameraman following us around. But like, let's face it, like we've all do some dumb shit. Just usually for most of us, nobody's looking. It's not broadcast on cable television. But again, he's just really good at using punishment. Yeah. Right. And like understands he may not be able to articulate in like an academic sense the principles of it, but intuitively he just sort of has a gift where he just kind of gets it and does it really well. So I think like in a lot of ways, it's a matter of like traditional dog training and traditional dog training education has sort of really focused the spotlight like heavily, like very heavily on one area being obedience, and then just like sort of neglected these other things. And all I'm really trying to do in a lot of my work is like, let's share that spotlight a little bit. Like there are these other areas of the dog's life that we need to put some energy into and we need to put some thought into, and so like, again, like I see this all the time with like, to go back to like trainers that they get like a lot of balanced trainers, 10 years ago, or I should say 15 years ago, maybe balanced dog training was really like compulsion based dog training with a little bit of praise and the occasional treat. Right. But like they weren't using food in a really constructive way. And then along comes Michael Ellis. Yeah. Right. And again, he wasn't the first person to do this, but because of his partnership with Learberg, they were able to popularize it and get the message out to the balanced training community more effectively. Because Ivan Balabanov was already doing this. Bart Bellin was already doing this. But Michael was really good at getting attention on it. And all of a sudden, balanced dog trainers were learning how to use motivational-based training, food-based training, right? And a lot of that was based around like building motivation, building drive, like chasing the food, like all these, and like all of that's good, but sometimes it's not, right? Like sometimes we're spending so much attention teaching the dog to go after things, but like sometimes going after things is like the dog's problem, right? Like. And so it's like, it's not that that's bad, but it's just like such a heavy emphasis on it that you get these like completely jacked up dogs where they're like, raring to go all the time. I had a young lady come out to visit me, one of the only shadow programs I've done in the past couple of years, and a really talented young trainer. She had a Malinois that she was doing PSA work with, and doing a really good job in her PSA work, but struggling with him in her personal life. And one of the areas was walks. Like, he was so cracked out on walks all the time, like just vibrating with energy. And when we looked at what she was doing with her dog, all of her attention when she's like, putting purposeful work into the dog was built around more drive, more motivation, chasing the food, chasing the toy. Yeah. That's when I'm giving you my full attention. Yes, the dog is having calm times. When the dog's having calm times, it's just like, we're doing nothing. Like, I'm not putting energy into that. And it's just like, but what if you took some of that energy you're putting into like all these drivey activities and put the energy into actual drills and activities where it encouraged your dog to go into a calmer state. It encouraged reinforcing lower states of arousal. It encouraged not having the dog chase the food, but maybe moving away from the thing they really want instead of moving towards it. Maybe instead of trying to achieve it, giving up the idea of achieving it. Yeah. In fact, one of my most popular exercises and online courses I have right now is called food claiming. And it's not really about food. It's about teaching the dog that sometimes the path to success is to stop trying.
Yeah.
Because so much of our dog training education is focused around make the dog try really hard to achieve the reward. But what if the dog's trying too hard to get things it wants? Like, what if we need to spend time on teaching the dog, you know what, like, just give it up, like, get the idea. How many of these reactive dogs we see is because they see another dog and they want to get to that dog. They're trying so hard. And what if we had an exercise that said, hey, when I do this, when I give you this signal, it means let that idea go.
Yeah.
And if you let that idea go, you have a higher probability of getting the thing you want. And that's what we're doing in food claiming. It's like, here's this thing that you really want, and we're going to teach you to let go of the entire concept that you might get this thing. And when you do that, when you show me that, like, you get it, that thing is off limits, you've given up the idea of getting it, that's precisely the moment that we're going to reinforce you.
Yeah.
Right. And I always say there's a huge difference between reinforcing a dog for nothing and reinforcing a dog for no reason.
Yeah.
Those are not the same thing. And a lot of people could benefit from a lot more of reinforcing a dog for nothing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if I've got a dog who's a little bit reactive or maybe just a little bit overstimulated, and I've got it in a room hanging out with me, and somebody opens a door to come in the room and that dog does nothing, reinforcing that.
Yep.
Right. That's like a very tangible concept of this, but we can build even better exercises around this concept, which is what food claiming basically is. And that's very different from, like, I'm just giving my dog treats for the hell of it.
Yeah.
Right. For no reason,
yeah.
Not intentional behind it. So again, I think it's just, that was a really long-winded answer to your question, but I think it really boils down to, like, the spotlight's been a little bit, like, we just need to reprioritize a little bit. You know, a lot of our modern dog training, like the classes that we teach, the structure of our lessons, the things that we're teaching, they're born out of training programs that date back 40 years from, like, old 4-H clubs. And like, when you would just see, like, kind of the country boy running group classes in the parking lot of a feed store. Right. And our lifestyles with dogs have changed dramatically since then, like, really dramatically. So it makes sense that maybe we should rethink the kinds of things that we're teaching, because our expectations for what our dogs need in order to be successful in this world have changed.
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, again, like, the models of dog training haven't. Like, we're still teaching as a priority, sit down, stay, come, heel.
Yeah.
And those things have value. Like, they're good, but they don't have the same value for every client.
Yeah.
You know, some clients come to me and, like, honestly, like, a sit stay is going to make such a minuscule difference in their life, but there's something else I can focus attention on that's going to make a massive difference in their life. And that's where we want to sort of develop our skills as trainers. Again, it's a huge thing that I coach people on, is like, well, how do we figure that out? What are the questions that we need to ask when we're doing this intake with a client to help us focus our training in the right place? And then how do we then take that information and build our training programs around it in a way that's really efficient, where right out of the gate, we're doing exercises for this person that are making a difference in their quality of life.
Yeah.
And what you find when you do that is you get a happier client. You get a client who's more engaged and who does the homework, because the homework is relevant
to their life,
to what they're paying you for.
Yeah. Everybody has, one thing I talk to people a lot that are having struggle, we'll see a lot of troubles in one-on-one sessions. They're not following through. And I always say, nobody is going to pay you money to do literally nothing. Like, that's not going to happen. Everybody has a pain point of something specific they hired you for. And as long as they truly understand how the things that you're having them do are going to directly solve that problem, they're going to do it. You know what I mean? Like, there's very few exceptions to that, I find.